Hi, folks, and you're welcome to be here with me today. This is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I am your host, Dr. Guerra, and today I have a wonderful guest. This is Nichole Christine. Hi, Nichole.
Hi. I wore my gold hoops just for you too
Yes,
today.
yes. Oh my
Yep.
gosh,
I
love
couldn't find
it.
the bigger ones, but this was as big as I could go.
Fabulous. I love it. I know. I love it when my guests wear their hoops too. It's so
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. Gold hoops all the way. Amazing.
Mhm.
So I wanted to share with the audience a little bit about you, Nichole Christine. So Nichole Christine is a psychotherapist, and fun fact, she's also on a podcast with her sisters. So her sisters have a podcast called the Spiritual Sisters Podcast, and I also recorded with her sister Gabrielle. So you can find that episode where she shares like her work, her astrology work. So it's very exciting.
Mhm.
Yay! Welcome, welcome, Nichole.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was
Yes,
telling you when we
absolutely.
jumped on that it felt like a blind date because after you recorded with my sister, she's like, I need to set you guys up.
I love it. I love it. It's super fun. I think it's great. I love connecting with people in that way.
Mhm.
Like for example, like, oh, I met this person at a networking event. I think you'd totally like them. And like I feel like
Mhm.
the universe works like that, honestly. So it's great.
Totally.
Yay. Awesome. Awesome. So let's see. So we'll start off with some conversation about culture. And you had shared with me previously about your background as Mexican and Puerto Rican. So I would love for you to share a little bit in terms of, how you self-identify and how you navigate those identities, essentially.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was listening to one of your recent episodes that you just did. Oh my gosh, I forgot her name. But she was Central American. You guys were talking a lot about the identity of like a Central American and just how
Mhm.
sometimes it gets lost,
Yes.
especially in different areas. She was from maybe Miami area, so she was talking about how it's very heavily Cuban, and then
Yes.
here in LA,
Hmm.
Mexican American is so big.
Hmm.
And
Oh, it's probably
and you were
Carla.
also mentioning
That was probably
I
Carla.
think
She's
so.
from
That sounds
Honduras.
familiar.
Yeah.
Yes. And you were mentioning, just the word like Hispanic and, Latinx and all the different words. And I've always identified as just Hispanic. It's such a triggering word to people, I feel like, especially these
Yes.
days.
Yes. Hmm.
And it's hard because I'm very much like American. Like I was born here and, my mom was born here,
Hmm.
but I was exposed to the Mexican part of my family, like that side.
Hmm.
And the Puerto Rican side is more biological. So my biological father is Puerto Rican. So I had very like little exposure to the Puerto Rican side,
I see.
except for,
Mhm.
one summer
Occasionally.
for 2 weeks,
Right,
and it
right.
was so it's interesting because when people ask me, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm like Mexican and Puerto Rican, but I'm also American, but I don't
Yeah.
say American. And I don't really like and it's sad, I don't feel like I have that connection to my Puerto Rican roots
Mhm,
because I didn't really grow up with that. So
mhm,
I would say I probably identify more Mexican American
mhm.
than I do Puerto Rican. And then my husband, his family's Mexican, my husband's first generation. So it's always been very familiar to me to be with other like Mexican and Mexican American people.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that makes sense. Similarly, as I was kind of sharing with you, my mom's side of the family is Guatemalan. My mom was born in Los Angeles, and
Mhm.
my grandparents were the ones who immigrated. And I've always kind of been more familiar with Central American culture with that side of my family versus my dad's side. My dad is from Guayaquil, Ecuador. And
Mhm.
it's true, there's not a ton of Ecuador, and also it's proximity, right? There's not a ton of
Right.
Ecuadorians in Los Angeles. And I've shared this in the podcast before. So it's true. It's part of it is like circumstantial.
Mhm.
It's kind of like where you grew up, who you hang out with, and things like that. Family dynamics, et cetera, as we
Mhm.
know, can be
Yeah.
challenging. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, and it can be complicated too, like growing up in the United States and not necessarily spending a lot of time in Latin America or the
Right.
Caribbean, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and my dad, my biological father, his side of the family were all on the East Coast.
Uh-huh.
So when I went to go visit, it was in Philadelphia area. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where they were all at. And even just being on another coast is a very big culture shock compared
Totally.
to growing up here in
Totally.
Southern
Yeah.
California next to the
Yeah.
beach and just very, very different.
Very, very, very. Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, it's so true. Like, especially with academia, going to conferences and things, you obviously travel and you meet different people. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, this is different. I'm like,
Yeah.
Boston,
Yeah.
New York. I'm like, oh,
Boston
this is a
too,
weird
yeah.
place. Like, not
Totally.
weird. Not to
Yeah.
be, I'm not trying to be, shady or anything, but it's just
But
really
just
different.
different. Yeah.
Very different. And then and vice versa, right? People come to LA, they're like, oh no, like this is a weird place, right?
I go to LA and I'm like, this is a weird place. Get me
Yeah.
back to my little like beach town. Like LA is
Totally.
just so much going on over there.
It's so true. It's like I was joking with a friend. So I went to the store yesterday and the checker was so kind. He had very much like a Southern hospitality, a Southern vibe. I was like, am I still
Mhm.
in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
It was funny. I
Yeah,
was
you
joking
don't
with
see
my
that
friend.
or
No, I was joking with my friend. I'm like, he must be new. God bless him. I'm like,
Mhm.
he must be new. Like,
Mhm. He must be. He came
he's
out
not
here.
jaded yet. Yeah.
He's an aspiring artist or actor
Could
and
be. Could be.
he's yeah,
Yeah,
very
he
nice
hasn't been
still.
jaded yet. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
super sweet. He was so kind. I mean, so much so that I actually went back in. I was like, can I let someone know that he was really nice? Like the checker was really,
Oh,
really
I love
nice.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's so true. Like 9 times out of 10, people complain, right? They go up and complain. Where's the manager? The Karens,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Karens of the
Yeah.
world.
Mhm.
And so I was like, you know what? Let me celebrate this guy, right? Like, let me
Yeah,
acknowledge his kindness because it goes a long way.
it
Anyway,
does.
but yeah.
It does.
Yeah, that's great. But that's super cool. Yeah, I love that. Mexican American. Yeah, I mean, and it's such a beautiful, it's such a strong culture. You know what I mean? Mexican American, Chicano culture. It's such a
Mhm.
strong culture. It's so beautiful. And even within Mexican culture, there's diversity depending on what region a person's from, the food style, etc. It's very cool.
Yeah, the food and just so in our area, we have a lot of different Mexican restaurants, but even just the styles of food
Totally.
is so different from one restaurant to another where we're at. One thing I kind of wanted to mention too that
Please, yeah.
I was just thinking of was it's always been kind of difficult for me to really identify like who I am. Like I said, I don't really say American, kind of like Mexican American,
Hmm.
because I'm very white facing. So when people hear that I'm
Oh.
Puerto Rican,
Hmm.
like look at this hair, and
Yeah.
it's not, your typical like beautiful
Curly,
curly
curly.
Puerto Rican hair. I have
Yeah.
this, straight white girl hair, and people aren't really quite sure what I am. So sometimes people are like,
Hmm.
"Oh yeah, that girl, she's like totally Hispanic." And
Hmm.
sometimes like, "No, she's super white." And so it was
Hmm.
hard cuz I never really felt like I fit in one way or another. So the city that I grew up in that I live in now,
Hmm.
there's a very heavy population of Mexican American.
Hmm.
And then I went to another city, which was primarily Caucasian, which was just one city over. So I was always like too white for the Mexican city, and then I was like too like not white for the
Hmm.
Caucasian city. It was very interesting. So I think I've always had kind of that hard time like finding my
Absolutely.
place.
Absolutely. It's that issue that so many of us have, ni de aquí ni de allá, right? Gloria
Mhm.
Anzaldúa, she articulated it so well, the borderlands, like what does
Yeah.
it mean? We go
Mhm.
to our quote unquote our home countries and we're too Americanized. And here in
Yeah.
the US, we're not accepted either. So
Right.
it's very challenging. And I agree with you too. Like I've had those moments where people sometimes they automatically assume what I am. Sometimes they're confused. And
Mhm.
it's true because I think many of us, there's this perception of what a Latina looks like. Even if you see, for example, like telenovelas, there's a
Mhm.
certain look of like who the
Yeah.
main characters are, who are, the ones who are sort of the sidekick characters or whatever. It's fascinating. Yeah, there's a lot there for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. For sure.
definitely.
Yeah. Oh, culture's so fascinating.
It is. It is.
Culture
Yeah.
and identity is super interesting. Yeah, so I'm teaching and my students will share, especially students who have very different cultures. They're like, oh, like I'm Japanese Mexican or I'm African American and I don't know, Thai, who knows, right?
Mhm.
And so like they
Mhm.
come from very different cultures and it's a challenge, it's
It
beautiful.
is.
It's a beautiful challenge, right? So
It
it's like
is.
they love both sides and yet it's hard to find a place, right? It's hard
Mhm.
to really, it's very challenging to feel like fully embraced or fully accepted anywhere.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh man, yeah. So, and California as a state is a trip. California in and of itself, right? Like you go north, it's very different. If you think about like Bakersfield, farming land, totally
Yeah,
different vibe. Then you come to LA, San Diego, and then literally borderland of
yeah,
Tijuana, etc. Totally different.
it is.
Yeah.
Even the food, so
Yes.
even from
Mhm.
San Diego County to LA County, like the
Mhm.
Mexican food is so, so different. And it's like, how are we getting things so different when we're not that far apart?
Totally.
Hmm.
I agree, definitely. Oh my goodness. So let's dive into my favorite topic, which is
Yeah.
religion, spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear about your journey a little bit, of course, as much as you feel like sharing.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you can share a little bit as far as like your own path, kind of like how you understand those energies, etc. Your experience with religion, if you've had experience with organized religion, etc. And then how the podcast came about, because as I think I mentioned
Hmm.
previously, I worked with Nicole's sister Gabrielle, and she did a reading for me, and it was
Hmm.
spot on, really
She's
amazing.
good.
She is good. She's got the
Not just because she's
gift.
my sister, she's
No,
just
no, no.
good.
She's
Yeah.
got the gift. She's
Yeah.
got the gift. And it was it was funny because so many things that she told me, and I was like, yep, yep, I felt that, and confirmed.
Hmm.
Like it was great. So I would love to hear from you, kind of yeah, what your path has been.
Definitely. So I was raised Catholic,
Mhm.
and my exposure to organized religion, I would say it's kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. And that goes back to me even just being a baby when my parents couldn't baptize me because they
Oh,
weren't married, right? It was the
oh,
80s and their things were a little bit different.
yeah, yeah.
And just being able to find a church that was willing to baptize me
Wow.
to
Mhm.
unmarried parents, right? So that was a
Mhm.
little bit of okay, like not too cool, but whatever.
Right.
My grandma was a catechism teacher.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so she was very big on, okay, you're going to do all your sacraments, and made sure that
Super
my mom had
important.
me enrolled in catechism.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I don't know what happened that I stopped going to catechism. I don't really remember what the circumstances were, but
Mhm.
my grandma got permission from her church to start doing like home lessons
Oh,
to me
nice.
for catechism. So I was getting homeschooled for catechism,
Oh, oh.
however many days a week that was. And then I had to go and finish it in person. So my grandma was like, okay, you're going to do your communion. I turned 18 and my grandma said, hey, I signed you up for confirmation classes and they start next week. And at 18, I had just graduated from high school. I didn't have a car yet. Like I barely had a job. I was just figuring stuff out.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, well, grandma, like, how am I going to get there? Oh, well, grandpa's going to pick you up. Like she had it all set
She had
out.
it
And
all planned out.
she had it all planned out. He's going to pick you up this time and then he's going to drop you off this day so you can still make it to college and, all
Oh
these
my
things.
gosh.
And,
My
you
goodness.
couldn't say no. Like you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
not say no.
Yeah, yeah.
So I ended
Yeah.
up doing all of that, communion
Wow.
confirmation because I was kind of like forced into it, kind of
Kinda
strong
backed
arm.
into it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really have a choice. And it was funny because when we were going to get married, my husband really wanted to get married in the church.
Mm.
And I was good. I said, you know what? The church will take me because I did my
Look
communion,
at
I did
that.
my
Look at that.
confirmation. But my
It came
husband,
in
the
handy.
heathen, yeah, the
That's so
heathen that
funny.
he is, didn't do his confirmation. So then we
That's
couldn't
funny.
end up doing it. And yeah, so that was kind of like my exposure to it. But I got a little, I don't know what the word is, just like disenchanted, I guess, with the Catholic Church for
Totally.
many reasons,
Sure.
especially with all the scandals and
Sure.
whatnot. So I still like identify as Catholic because I feel like it was such a big part of who I was when I
Mhm.
was younger.
Yeah.
Not so much now. So now I'm definitely more spiritual. And when I say that, it's almost as if and I don't mean to be like so polarizing, but I heard
Mhm.
another one of your guests say this and I was like, yes, this is so spot on. Like I don't
Mhm.
necessarily believe that there's a person in the sky.
Sure. Mhm.
I believe that there's a higher power. I believe that there's something bigger
Or mhm.
that we can't
Mhm.
see,
Mhm.
but I don't necessarily think that there's a man up there just kind of watching us or a woman. I just don't believe it.
Mhm.
So my views have definitely become more, I don't know, like spiritual and universal
Yeah.
than the Catholic way.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I'm with you, right? Like, I'm with you. I was raised Catholic. I had some very negative experiences, growing up in the Catholic Church, et cetera. And I didn't do my confirmation until I was in college. I
Mm,
was a freshman in college, and it's so different because I chose it, right? Like, I
right.
thought about it. I was like, no, actually, like, I do want to do this. And in the college setting, thankfully, thank God, the campus ministers approached it differently. And like,
Okay.
my sponsor was like a sophomore in college. She was like basically like my same age. Anyway, so it's I get it. I really, really get
Hmm.
it. And that's the thing is, like, especially as I have the privilege of talking to so many young people through teaching, right? And so many of them are like, yeah, there's just this feeling of like disappointment,
There is, yeah.
disillusionment, disappointment. And the top reasons that people have, totally valid, are, the way women are treated in the Catholic Church. Women are still not able to be ordained, right? LGBTQ concerns, the
Hmm.
homophobia, transphobia. Like, it's
Totally.
so real, it's so real. And so I fully get it. I fully get it. And it is fascinating because many people will express that sentiment of cultural Catholicism.
Hmm.
Even if a person is not going into church every Sunday, even if they're, not like super religious, there is a familiarity,
It
with
is.
things like, right, with things like Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Rosary,
Hmm.
like things like that. It's like, okay, you know, and even if, right, for example, like if a little cousin is born and they go get baptized, people go
Yeah,
because it's
we
about
do
family.
that.
Because it's about
Yeah.
family, and more so than it is. And it's so true. It's like people go more so because of the family, not necessarily because it's like a
Yes.
religion thing, right? Right.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
totally what it is.
Yeah.
And even so, right, like I'll still sometimes do the sign of the cross when I'm, passing by one of the churches. And
Yep.
so there's still little parts of
It's
it in
autopilot. It's
me.
autopilot.
Yeah, it is. It's like, oh, turn the music down and
Yep. Yeah.
so there's that part. But then also, as I got older and then it was my turn to baptize my son, I
Hmm.
ran into the same issue
Ah.
with not necessarily because me and his father weren't married, but it was, "Oh, well, are you guys a part of this church, and are you gonna come?" And it left such a bad taste in my mouth when we went to
Mm-hmm.
go see this one church,
Mm-hmm.
and the would-be godfather was on speakerphone, my sister was with us, she's my son's godmother, and when we walked out of there, they were both like, "What just happened?" And, like,
Mm-hmm.
"Why did that person, like, treat you that way?" I was in
Yeah.
tears. I was
Oh
in
wow.
tears. I was like, "I
Oh
just wanna baptize my
no.
son." So I ended up having to go to the church that kinda takes everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Catholic church in town that ended up, where I did my communion and where I did my confirmation,
Yeah.
and it was no
Yeah.
problem, but it
Yeah.
was, I tried to venture out, "Oh, let's do
It's
something
so
in the
interesting.
middle."
Mm-hmm.
Awful,
Mm-hmm.
in tears, and I was like,
Wow.
"This is so bad,
That's
so
terrible.
bad."
Yeah, literally talk about leaving a bad taste in your mouth. That's exactly,
Yeah.
unfortunately those stories are very common, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately. Um and wow, that's so, yeah, it's sad because it's very true that there are churches like that, right? Where, if a person's divorced, they can't take communion, like they're super
Yeah.
super super strict. But I'm glad that at least like you were able to find a church that's more accepting, more
Yeah,
welcoming.
definitely.
That's good. That's good.
I have
Wow,
some
yeah.
hope for the Catholic faith now and just the religion and itself with the new pope.
Yes.
I was a little on the fence about him day 1. I was like, "I don't
Yeah.
like this. I don't like this at all." I had to do a little bit of homework, and I said, "You
Mhm.
know what? This guy seems okay, so let's
Yeah,
see what he can
yeah.
do." So,
I'm hopeful.
I'm fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
totally. I'm hopeful too. I'm optimistic for a couple reasons. I feel like his experience living in Peru is very significant. He lived in Peru for over a decade, maybe longer, and I
Mhm.
think that being in that environment, experiencing other parts of the world, you know, I think is transformative, and he wasn't in Lima. He wasn't in like
Right.
a huge city. And so to be in that environment, and it seems as though most of the community there really loved him. They were like
Mhm.
super excited for him, really loved him, really embraced him. And that's huge too, because I was curious. I was like, okay, what are people saying, right?
Mhm.
What are people saying? Like, what is this community saying? Are they saying like, oh, he was awful, he was this, he was that? Or are they
Right.
saying like, no, he was great, we love him, he's amazing? And it was the latter. They loved him,
Yeah.
they embraced him. So that gave me hope. And the fact, and this to me was very significant. I'm actually writing about this right now. Is that the first words he uttered were peace, right? Peace on earth, bringing peace, talking about peace. He's already denounced the violence and wars that are happening abroad, the multiple things that are happening abroad. And that gives me hope, that he's paying attention, right? That he's paying attention. He's not afraid to call it out. I think that's what we need,
Yeah. And he's
is a
denouncing a
leader
lot of
like
stuff
that.
that's happening here on our own soil, which I am
Yes.
not mad about. So
Yes, exactly. Right. I actually think it's very brilliant. The fact the Holy Spirit doing the work. It's brilliant that that this Pope is from the US, right? Because in other words, like, and this is something very interesting, right? And I also say this all the time. Whether or not people are religious, religion still plays a role. Religion and politics still go hand in hand. Religion is very influential. Christianity is very influential in this world to this day. And so to this day, people go visit the Pope, right? Vice president, we just had vice president go over there, presidents, world leaders, they do
yeah.
interact with him.
It's a big deal, yeah.
It's a big deal. So again, I think it's pretty cool that it happens to be somebody from the US. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I love it.
It's cool.
So to answer the second part of your question, so then how the podcast kind of came about and just our roots in like spiritual work. I would say so. My sister was the one that went through her awakening before anybody else. And we were all kind of looking at her like, what is happening?
Yeah,
What is her going through? What, I think she thought she was
that
losing
sounds
it.
about right. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it was rough.
Intense, yeah.
And then I would say in 2022, I don't even remember actually. I can't, might have been 2022. I kind of just had some things going on here around, with my family that kind of led to my own. And I would say it wasn't necessarily like my first awakening, but it was like the first one that I actually really fully dove into
More
because
intense,
I had yeah, it was definitely more intense because I would say it had maybe like I was having little pokes for a while, and then this one
little
was like
nudges. Yeah,
this one was like a violent shake. So I was like, okay, I gotta pay attention.
It cannot be denied. Exactly.
No. And that was kind of like the start of mine. And so my sister was there and I'm like calling her every day, what is this? What is this? What are all these things that are happening? And basically the podcast was born from, okay, I need to learn about this work. And this I think is going to help like keep me accountable to the work.
I love it.
So it's been about 2 years. I've actually stepped away from it recently. So my other two sisters are doing it just because I've gotten busy with work and starting my own business and, just all the other things that I have going on. So I said, okay, I think you guys need to take this over. But it originally started off as one thing and it kind of morphed into something else.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I think the podcast kind of told us like what it wanted to be. And we've all three done intuitive training. But Gabby's the one that's really, stuck with it and gone for it because I think she just has it. I'm very intuitive, but I'm not always like tapped in. So I think for me, the times I did try to tap in, it was really exhausting. And I was like, you know what? I can't sustain this. Like, I can't do readings. I did my Hannah readings for a while, but I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is just too exhausting, too much. Yeah. And I'm really interested though, eventually in maybe doing some mediumship training because mediumship actually came to me really not easily, but a lot easier than the other work. So I was, my very first kind of practice one, someone asked me to connect to their dad. I got a name dropped in and they were like, wait a minute, like this is just some random name that like shouldn't really be here type of thing.
Wow.
So the mediumship I think came a little bit easier, but again, it's a lot of work. So my kind of focus now has shifted more because you mentioned a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in California, but I feel like sometimes therapy can be a little bit constraining, especially in the sense that I can only practice in California. I can't see anybody outside of the state of California.
Right.
I can only practice here.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things that I can and can't do. So I've kind of pivoted more into coaching and doing more subconscious reprogramming work. So that's been kind of my focus. So now I'm kind of calling myself like a psychotherapeutic coach because I can blend both. I can blend
Great.
my therapy background and my training and my knowledge from that, from, the over a decade of experience that I have with this new information. And for me, when I started really diving into the subconscious work, it just made sense. It was almost like a learning, but it was kind of a remembering. Like, okay, I've learned about this before. Like maybe I just know about this from my therapy work, but this just makes so much more sense. And I'm getting so much more results from this. So that's kind of been where I'm pivoting to. I still obviously practice as a therapist in my day-to-day and like my 9 to 5, but I'm really trying to move more into the coaching space that is, definitely a little more like spiritual and personal development with a little bit of the science, because I am a very logical person. So for me, I need to have the two. I need to have the logic and the woo. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing. Yeah, it's funny, like I can totally relate. So it's interesting, like my background school-wise, right? So I'm a researcher. I'm a PhD in systematic theology, right? Very, very is formal the right word I want to use?
It's
Pretty
very research
structured,
heavy. Yeah, very research
very
written, like,
intellectual,
yeah.
structured, like right.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, as I've kind of, similar to you, I'm like, there was a lot of things that I kind of like ignored perhaps, but in 2020 there was no more ignoring. There was no more, between it was a 1-2 punch between the pandemic and then
Mhm.
my bipolar diagnosis. Like
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's so, I have to say, like, it has been very a challenge. And I bring this up in terms of therapy and things because, like, okay, am I losing my mind? Is this manic? Is this spiritual? Is this what is happening to me? And so it's been a challenge for sure to figure out like what's really going on. But I really appreciate what you shared because I agree with you 1,000% in terms of energy. I've noticed myself, like, I have to be really intentional about who I'm around. I have to
Mhm.
cleanse. I have my Palo Santo right here.
Mhm.
Like I have to
Yeah.
cleanse the space. I have to do like salt baths. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah.
Because you pick up, like, especially now it's heightened, right? Like I feel like it's heightened to where I'm picking up on every little thing that's happening. But yeah, it's amazing, but it can be very draining for sure. So
It is, and I think for me, the hard part as, like, also someone who's very academic, like, psychology is a
mhm.
lot of research, it's a lot of
Totally.
writing, it's a lot of, this and that, and it was hard for me to kinda reconcile, "Okay, am I losing my mind? Are the people that are telling me that they're hearing voices, do
Mhm.
I need to diagnose them with
Mhm.
something from the
Something.
DSM-5?
Exactly. Right.
Or is this actually happening, right?
Right.
And it's really hard, especially because
Mm.
I don't know if you've talked about this before on other episodes, but then you have all your clair senses. So some
Yes.
people are smellers, some people are feelers and hearers and
Mhm. Mhm.
and seers. And so it's like, okay, well, they're telling me that they're seeing things.
Mhm.
So I need to try to figure out, are they seeing, is it hallucinations, or are they seeing like through the veil?
See? Yeah. That's, oh my gosh, you totally understand. Like you have so
Mhm.
well like articulated. It's been a struggle because
Yeah,
exactly that. It's like, wait a minute. Like, am I seeing things in like a spiritual way or am I seeing
right,
things that I'm losing my mind? I don't know. Like it's
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and even
hard.
for me, and my husband has the same background I do. So when I was kind of
Mm,
going through this and telling
yeah.
him, "Hey, like I can actually communicate, with spirits,"
Yeah.
he was like, but can you?" So it's a lot of trying to figure out, is it this or is it that? Is it medical?
Mhm.
Is it spiritual? And
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm kind of like towing that line a lot, which is, I'll have my therapist hat on and, my research hat, but then I have my spiritual
Mhm.
girly hat and I'm like, okay, like what is it right now?
Mhm.
Because it's
Mhm.
not always easy to like decipher and figure out.
Yeah, you know what? This was such a small but very helpful thing, and I wish I remember who told it to me. Someone said like, "Do you feel scared?" Right? Like if you feel
Mm,
scared and nervous, then you need to be careful. You need to kind of check in with your therapist, et
mm-hmm,
cetera, et cetera.
mm-hmm,
But if you feel like peaceful and if you feel like not
mm-hmm.
scared and you feel like supported,
Yeah,
maybe it is that passed on relative, maybe it
yeah,
is, an angelic presence, who knows. And I was like, huh, okay, like,
yeah.
because I was like, I need to like a litmus test, like what's happening, like, yeah.
Yeah, so I was doing that to myself all the time.
Mm-hmm,
Just, okay,
mm-hmm.
what is happening, and trying to really
Wow.
stay like grounded in reality, but also being willing to like step into the spiritual work. And so I
Sure.
feel like I always have kind of like one foot in each.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
almost like it's almost like when you go to the border in Tijuana and then there's, the US and then the Mexico and you're like kind
Yep.
of straddling both. That's
Totally.
what it's like.
Totally, totally. Yeah, exactly. And you're so right in terms of like the constraints that are placed upon, right, licensed
Yeah.
therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. Is like,
Mhm.
there are guidelines, and so
Yeah.
I think it could be challenging.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
wanna be able to work with people that, wanna work with me that are not just in California, so I can do that through coaching, and
Yeah.
it's gonna look a little bit different than therapy, but not, like, drastically
Hmm.
different to where they're feeling like, "Okay, what's happening?"
Yeah.
Sometimes it might, because we get really, like, spiritual and esoteric in my coaching sessions,
Hmm.
but, there's still that science base and that,
Hmm.
therapeutic approach that's in there.
Hmm. Hmm. Totally. Oh, I love that. It's super great. Thank you so much for sharing, Nicole.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up our amazing conversation, this has been so much fun. I wanted to ask a question about the inner Nina. So each episode, I ask my guests about their inner child in terms of like, if you could go back in time and share a piece of advice with your younger self, what would it be? And then, just general advice for young Latinas today. There's so much going on in the world. People are
Mhm.
navigating so many things. Just kind of that wisdom of, just being
Yeah.
at this point in life, right?
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about this question
Hmm.
because I know a lot of times when we talk about, like our inner child or inner Nina, it's like, I don't know. I think automatically my mind goes to younger, that kind of like 0 to 7 age. But
Hmm.
for me, I would say in the last almost year and a half, I've been really focused on like my inner adolescent, my inner
Hmm.
teenager.
Hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with I got a new job. Well, it's not new anymore, but it was new last January. And I was placed in my old high school.
Oh,
So
wow.
I
Well, that's
started
powerful.
providing counseling services
Mm.
to students in my old high school with
Wow.
some of my old teachers there and my old counsel, my old like academic counselor, and
Wow.
nothing has changed and everything looked the same. And I felt like I was transported back to 1999. And I
Back
was
in
like,
time. Hmm.
what is happening? And so
Wow.
with that, it was actually really cool. I was in our district office one day and I said, "Hey, can I get my records?" And they said, "Oh, okay." And they pulled them up and they had stuff from kindergarten. So I got
Wow.
this like, yeah, so that really had
The
me
whole
like,
history. Wow.
yeah,
That's
and they
incredible.
said, "We usually don't have this. Like you got lucky because we usually don't have a lot of this information."
Wow.
Like a random little drawing that I did when I was doing the testing
Oh,
to go into kindergarten, just little
that's so
things.
cute.
And
Wow.
I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." So I really I think that's when I started focusing more on the inner child to an
Hmm.
extent. So I went down this rabbit hole of, "Oh my gosh, I want to see old TV shows and things
Yeah.
that I used to enjoy." And so I kind of started doing that. And a lot of the work I really feel has been, that inner adolescent, that inner teen, because I would say like the bulk of my like difficult years
Hmm.
growing up were in that time.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I feel like that's what needs to be healed the most for me
Hmm.
is, that kind of like, I don't know, 12 to 17 age range, which
Yep.
isn't necessarily inner child, but to me, like I was still a child, and I went through some
Yeah,
really, really heavy stuff at that time.
totally.
So I would say, if I'm talking to my inner
Your inner
teen,
teen
my
then,
inner
yeah.
adolescence,
Mm-hmm.
it's, my advice is kind of like, don't worry so much about the things that you're worried about, like, aren't going to matter
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah.
much, or at all,
Ooh,
right? I mean, I can't even
my
remember
gosh.
half of the things that I was so concerned about when I was that
Totally.
age. And I really appreciate this new generation. I think they're hilarious, they're adorable because they kind of don't care as much as we did. And we did this thing on Friday, this event at work where we had to dress like a student. And it was so fun for us to just kind of dress like one of the students because they really, a lot of them aren't as concerned with, needing to look a certain way. They're all about comfort. And I was like, you know what? I can
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. Our generation was not like that. We were
Yeah.
not about comfort, right? We were the ones wearing the heels in the club, and they're
Oh
in their
yeah.
tennis shoes. They're in their sneakers at the club. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I love it.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So I
Oh my
think it would
gosh.
just be
Yeah.
like, don't worry about, like, those things don't matter. That boy doesn't matter. You're not even gonna remember him
Not at
in
all.
5 years, in 10
Yeah.
years, and I think, like, if I'm telling myself, like, it's gonna be like, your life is gonna be so much better than you could even imagine. Like
Mm.
like, you don't even know what's in store for you, and I think that's what I would tell
Wow.
myself as a little one.
Beautiful, beautiful. I agree. I agree with you at 10,000%. That time period, at least, and I'll, kind of speak for myself. I feel like it's so challenging because you have a mind of your own to an extent, right? But you're still, for most of us, still living at home. You haven't left for college yet. I remember it being brutal. It was brutal. I could
It
not
was
wait to
hard.
start college. I could not wait to go off and start college. Oh my gosh. I
Mhm.
stayed in LA. So it's not like I
Yeah.
went very far, but even just like being in a different space and things like that. So I totally agree with you. And the other point is I remember the business attire in the club. Oh my gosh, my friends and my friends and I, we still joke about that. It's like, oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a business suit in the club.
Yeah.
Like, what are we
Yeah.
thinking? It's so random.
Businesswomen special at the club, yeah,
It's so
and
random.
they're not like that, like, I don't even think clubs are, like, a
Club is not a
thing
thing anymore, I
really, which
think.
I love because I am too old, they are too loud, I do not wanna be around any of
So
that.
funny.
Yeah.
I love music. I love like EDM and things
Mhm.
like that. So I've seen that something that's becoming slowly but surely kind of growing are these day parties, right? So it's
Yeah,
basically like the nightclub experience, but
yeah,
it starts at 5 p.m. I'm like,
uh-huh,
that's what I need. That's
yep,
what I need.
yeah, totally, yeah,
You know?
I
Yeah.
for me, I would need to start a little bit earlier, I like to be in bed by 8,
There you go.
so I'd be like, "You know what, if we could start this at, like,
A
2,
lunchtime.
yeah, be done
Yeah.
by 6, like, that'd be perfect,
I love it.
perfect for
Yeah.
me."
It's so funny. It's funny how things change, right?
Yeah,
Um but oh goodness, that's fantastic. I love it. Great advice. And it's true. It's so spot on. The things that we were worried about are not actually that
mm-mm.
it works itself out, in other words.
Yeah.
It works
No,
itself out.
it
Yeah.
totally does. I feel like, for me in high school, it was a challenge, and just a big challenge for several reasons.
Mhm.
And the things that were a challenge for me back then, it's like it's not a thing anymore. The things that people made fun of me for, like, don't exist anymore, and they
Yeah.
can't make fun of me anymore
Right.
for
Right.
those things, or, like, really for anything. And it's like, wow, like, it took me, 20 some years to be able to get to that
To
point
see
where
it.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, like, doesn't
It's so
matter.
amazing. Yeah, it's so amazing. It's true. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I don't know what it is, and I would love like some child psychologist to explain this. Like, why are kids so mean to each other in general, right? It's
Mhm.
always like, "Oh my god, you have glasses. Oh my god, you're really short. Oh my god, you're
Yeah.
really tall." It's like you can't win for trying, right? Like no matter what
Mm-mm.
you look like or who you are, it's wrong. Right?
Mhm.
It's the
Mhm.
wrong look. It's so bizarre. And then fast forward, it's incredible. Like that same person who was too tall and skinny is now like a runway model for being tall and
Mhm.
skinny,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
example, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so it is wild how the things that we were worried about no longer are an issue. I remember like the number one stressor of my life during high school, of course, was where to go to college, right?
Oh,
Getting into
I was
college.
gonna say
Yeah.
mine was my sweaty underarms, and now my
Oh,
underarms don't even sweat.
you're so funny.
That was my
Oh
big
my
thing
gosh.
that I was so self-conscious about.
Yeah, that was like the big drama was like getting into college, where to go to college, that kind of thing. Um, and I was like, I got accepted to a couple, I got rejected from a couple, and I went to Loyola Marymount, which again, looking back, that was the right place for me. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the right place for me at that time. I had a great experience, etc. And we move on, right? It's like that those 4 years came and went and you move forward. But it's really interesting how like those things that stress us out in the moment are a non-issue later on.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
funny because college wasn't even a thought for me. Like I was just ready to get out of high school and I wasn't even thinking college. And I didn't have people didn't expect a lot from me. So, when I did go to college, somebody really close to me, and it wasn't meant maliciously at all, but they said to me, "Wow, we're so proud of you. You're graduating from college and we all thought that you were going to end up, a pregnant, a teen mom on
Wow.
welfare."
Oh
And I say,
no.
but that was,
That's rough. That's rough.
that was what was expected based on, my home life
Jeez.
and just everything.
Wow.
So the fact that I, not only didn't become a teen, I didn't become a mom until I was 32. The fact that I didn't become a teen mom and I graduated college and I went and got a master's and I got a license, it was
Above
like,
and
it was
beyond. Yeah. Yeah.
above and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah. So college wasn't
Yeah.
even a thing for me in high school. So good for you.
Totally, totally. Yeah, like it's I remember my parents like definitely wanted me to go to college because they couldn't, right?
Mhm.
Or they started working and etc. But I think that once I like pursued the PhD, they're like, "Wait, what? You're gonna
Yeah.
you're gonna keep going to school some more?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And
Mhm.
so it's cool. Again, I think everyone has this life is so crazy. I think we all have our path and our destiny and things like that. And so, and this is another thing, if I can like kind of chime in too in terms of the advice, your life doesn't have to look like everybody else's, and it's okay.
Mm-mm.
Right? Like your life does not have to look like all your cousins and all your neighbors and all your family members. No, like your life is your own and it can look super different. And that's great. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what's supposed to
I
happen.
think that's advice I'm trying to take in myself right now because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm trying to move towards like a different path and like a
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
vision than what I had, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that nobody that I know is doing or has done, and so it's a little scary to be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I wanna do something totally different."
Yeah.
And people are kinda looking at me like, "Why?" Just you have a license, just, like, do something with that. And I'm
Leave it
like,
at that. Mhm.
yeah,
Oh, no.
that's not enough for me."
Yeah. No, change is good. Change is good. Change can be uncomfortable, but it's
Mhm.
it's totally worth it. I think, yeah, most importantly, especially, like as intuitive people, spiritual people, like that nudge doesn't go away. That nudge doesn't go away. I was
It
cracking
hasn't.
up when when your sister did the reading for me. I think I might have shared this in a different episode or something. One of her first questions is, "Do you have a book?" And I'm like, because this
Uh-huh.
book, I literally, like this book has been haunting me for almost a decade. Like I have to write it,
Oh.
and I tried to kind of right. I tried to kind of shelf it. I really did. I really did. Especially during the pandemic, I was like, nah, it's not gonna. I don't need to do it. And she's like, I can't tell you what to do, but I
But
would
you need
highly
to do it.
recommend. Yeah. She's
Mhm.
like, I would highly recommend you get that thing published. I'm like, okay. But yeah, exactly that, right? It's like
You
those
can't
little
run from it.
nudges. You can't run. It becomes louder and louder until you pay attention.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when's the book coming out?
Oh my God. I know. Like I'm gonna spend some time writing this afternoon for sure. It has to happen. Like
Yeah.
it really needs to happen. I was thinking about the Pope earlier because I was writing the section that I was working on was about the Pope and stuff. Thank you. It's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. It definitely needs to, you know, be birthed, as they say. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. Oh my goodness, Nichole, Christine, this was lovely. This was a
I love
fabulous
this. Thank you.
conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show. folks who are
thanks for having me.
listening, yes, thank you so much. So this is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. New episodes are available every Wednesday. The YouTube video is available also on Wednesdays. I upload those to be released at 1:11 Pacific time. And you can find the link on YouTube or just type in Gold Hoops and God. And I will definitely tag Nichole Christine on her social media where you can reach out and connect with her as well. Awesome.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
This was so fun. Thank you so much.